So for those of you that don't know much about Foyer Federation, we've been around for 31 years, and we were set up, Foyers and the Foyer Federation were set up as an alternative to hostel accommodation for young people who can't live at home. And we work with around 3,500 young people a year within the Foyer network. And we exist to inspire those young people to realize their power and purpose and have a healthy transition into adulthood. So we work with about 65 local and independent youth-supported accommodation projects. Some of them use the name Foyer, some of them don't, but they all deliver an offer that empowers and enables young people to move forward in their lives. The approach is a collaborative one that works alongside 30 partner housing associations as far north as Aberdeen, down to the southwest, Penzance in Cornwall, projects of various different sizes. And we don't own any assets ourselves, so our primary role is to support those projects and the young people within them. Our approach is centered around young people. We try not to define that too much by age, but it generally is the ages of 16 to 25, sometimes up to the age of 30. And it's those young people that influence the way we work as the Foyer Federation and led to the advantage thinking approach that we're going to be talking more about. So you can see that middle layer, the Foyer Federation, we're there to try and support the Foyers, and they work with young people to ensure that they're involved, engaged, progressing and leading the way. And it's all kind of saturated by that advantage thinking approach, which we're going to talk a bit more about now. So advantage thinking is a different way of seeing the world and seeing the best in everyone. It's as an approach ensures that we're not defined by our deficits, but takes a holistic look at who we are and the systems that surround us. The reason advantage thinking was kind of first identified and put out into the world was because we'd noticed within youth-supported accommodation about 15 or so years ago, we kind of come to the conclusion that there was far too much of a prevailing, easy for me to say, deficit-based culture within homelessness services, within supported accommodation. And on the right, you can see some examples of deficit-based practice. So understanding people by what they can't do, things like needs assessment, risk assessments, planning interventions for people rather than with them, and often unequal power relationships that existed or exist within those projects. So advantage thinking was launched 12 years ago to challenge that culture. And there's a few examples of what that can look like within a service. So measuring gains with people on what is meaningful to them, rather than just what the organization feels like they need to achieve or what a contract is saying they need to achieve, and supporting people to take control of their lives. I won't go into too much detail about that because I want to free up some time to talk to Mark and Tori. But so in a nutshell, advantage thinking is takes our needs and deficits and our weaknesses, but gives them a different focus by being connected to our goals, assets, and strengths. Advantage thinking believes that taking positive action allows us to deal more effectively with the negatives in our lives. So I'm going to, just to mix it up a bit, I'm going to show a quick video which goes through the 7 tests of advantage thinking. The 7 tests are a bit of a framework and to help us reflect and challenge and grow an advantage thinking approach. So let me see if I can get this correct, get this right, and share. Tabby, if you could just give me a thumbs up that the sound's okay once I start this.
Okay.
Right. Well, I hope you haven't all fallen asleep, because I feel quite relaxed after that. So, like I said, hopefully that just gives you a bit of an idea of the 7 tests of advantage thinking. I'll talk very briefly about the 7 tests. So test 1 is about how we talk about the people we work with. So some of the elements that make that up are amplifying strengths, disrupting labels, and using affirmative language. So quick example, instead of saying care leaver, flipping that and saying a young person who has experienced care. There's a lot more to it than that, but just a quick example. Test 2 is around understanding. So how we understand people, so understanding them through their strengths. So being able to identify strengths, being able to, or helping them to tell a positive story about themselves and others, and tracking growth in a way that looks at their strengths, not just the things that are lacking. So one example of this would be designing your KPIs as an organization around the growth of strengths rather than simply problems you're solving. The third test is around working with. It's about developing those strengths. It's about a person-centered approach. Mayday do a lot of work around that, and collaborative working. And just like Mayday, we support coaching as an approach within that. So giving people agency, an opportunity to move their own lives forward rather than suggesting things that they should do. The fourth test around investing in is a wide-ranging test, but it's about validating strengths, personalizing opportunities, and embracing risk. And that can include simple things as, just investing in the good quality Wi-Fi for the people you're working with. If your staff Wi-Fi is better than the Wi-Fi that you have for your young people, then it suggests something needs to change. The fifth area is believe in, and that's about promoting aspirations, having high standards, and nurturing trust. The sixth area we're going to talk about in a second, because that's the area we're going to focus on for our discussion, and that's about involving people. And the final area is around challenging ourselves and others. So being able to celebrate success and promote the talent of the people you're working with, mobilizing networks and collaborating with others that work in this way, and influencing positive change. So that can be as simple as using a different language when you're approaching a funding bid, rather than using some of the disadvantaged language that is often within those bids. So that's a whistle-stop tour of the 7 tests. I want to focus in on the 6th test and then introduce Mark and Tori. The 6th test is around involving the people you work with, allowing them to use their own experiences to develop their own solutions. And there's kind of 4 elements that I've just highlighted on screen. So that's doing with people, being an enabler rather than a rescuer, encouraging engagement, so looking at different ways that you can act with people, interact with people, developing representation, so making sure that people are represented in positions of power, and actively listening, so taking the opportunity to listen to young people wherever you can. And one way we've tried to do this and implement this is through the Youth Power Fund that's funded by Blagrave Trust. We funded 7 Foyers, and it's enabled 120 young people within the first year and a bit to lead within those projects. It's impacted a further 375 young people who are living in those projects. 27 staff have been involved in that learning program, and it's invested 300k over 3 years into those projects. And it's one of those projects that Tori and Mark are going to talk about. They look very different in different foyers. I'm just going to ask them a couple of questions. And so I will stop sharing so that we can see them better, or I can see them better. And then you just cancel that. So I don't know whether you could spotlight or Tori and Mark, somebody, whoever's in charge. That'd be great. So I'm gonna start with you, Tori, if that's okay, and just don't forget to take yourself off mute. Just ask, why is it important to you that young people take up positions of power?
Growing up, I lived in an environment, both in school, in friendship groups, and like within the home life, that I didn't have much power or control over what went over, and it made me feel quite insecure and scared for a lot of things. So to be able to take control and have power over really important things means a lot to me. The word empowerment has power in it, and that's definitely how the whole thing makes me feel. So it's really amazing to be able to have that experience along with other young people. So yeah.
Thank you. That's brilliant. And I'm just going to throw one to Mark, and then we'll ask you a bit more about how you've been involved in the project, Tori. Mark, I guess whether you can just give a quick overview of kind of what the Youth Power Fund has enabled you to do within Chad, and kind of what has changed through the program.
Yeah, so we've got there's 3 aspects to our project. So there's sharing power with the young people who actually live or have lived within our foyer. And then there's two elements to it where it's slightly further afield. So we have a project called Rise, which is all about young people's activities and getting young people to do more within Dudley. So as opposed to that being led by a paid employee, it's now being led by young people, and they are the ones that are sourcing and actually and sort of marketing the projects and the activities. And then we are, as a foyer, part of a wider alliance who work with young people in Dudley. And whilst there are a couple of steering groups to that in terms of how we work, how we source young people to work with and things like that, there wasn't much of a voice for young people within that in terms of how we worked with them. So the third aspect is a young people's steering group within that. I guess what's changed within the projects, I think overwhelmingly the way we listen to young people and their views and opinions. I think in the past, not deriding people from the past, but I think our committee within the foyer was generally used as a sounding board in terms of, we're thinking of doing this. What would you like to do? Do you think that's a good idea? Whereas we've completely flipped that on its head, where young people bring the ideas. Young people are the ones that are bringing it to the committee. I'm there, I guess, to facilitate a little bit, but also as a guest of the young people. It is their committee. I think another thing that's changed is the level of active involvement from young people, from the residents and people like Tori, who's now moved on. The committee was quite small, maybe 2, 3, 4 young people at a time, whereas we're now getting I'd say between about 8 and 10 young people turning up to the meetings and being actively involved. And I think that's because they feel listened to, and their opinions and their ideas are being carried forward. It's influenced the team structure that we have and how we work with young people. I think one of the biggest things that I'm proud of is how it's developed young people, and the very fact that Tori is on this and being interviewed as part of this is testament to that development. And I think and within that as well. So we're in the process, coming to the end of the process of developing a leadership training program for the young people who've taken part in it, so that hopefully it's not just a wonderful sort of volunteering experience. They actually get qualifications at the end of it to move them forward in life as well. And obviously there's like the little day-to-day changes, things like improved Wi-Fi, as you mentioned earlier. I think welcome meetings for young people, just understanding what it's like from their point of view as opposed to just our point of view. And then there's the possibility of pets being introduced at the foyer for the first time ever, which
Wow.
we'll see how that goes.
Thanks, Mark. Tori, it'd be great to just hear a bit more about your involvement and kind of any highlights from your experience.
I've been really lucky to have loads of involvement, to be honest. I've had a lot more involvement than I initially expected to, because when I first joined the foyer, I can't lie, I was a little bit scared of Mark. Just for, I've never really had a good relationship with like adult figures. So to come in and to be able to take on as much as I have and have as much involvement has been amazing. I've had opportunities to meet with the board of Chad and discuss the involvement that I want young people to have. I spoke at the AGM the other day that we had, which was incredible. And then all of the interaction that I've had with the Foyer Fed, it's been life changing it doesn't quite cover it, to be honest. To the point that like I've had the confidence to go back to college, and I've been messaging Mark about, like governmental things that I want to change that I don't agree with, which I feel like now I have the power to do, which me last year I wouldn't have been able to do that. And when I first moved into the flat, and I couldn't, like, obviously from living there. Whereas now, there's been two paid roles that have been introduced, which I've managed to attain one, uh, which we've been able to do. Like relevant training. So I've got my adult safeguarding certificates, children safeguarding certificates, all of that stuff. And it's really put me in the right direction for being able to take on the career role that I want to.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Um,
And there's actually one more thing. From speaking to the board, I asked for a seat at the table with the board, which now I'm kind of glad that I look back on and didn't get the seat, because the meetings weren't what I expected them to be. But we've created a committee which will have a member of the board at that table. So it's a bit more than like the three like separate groups that we've got going on, and it also involves all of the other sectors of Chad, because we have like the young people's part, but then we have the domestic abuse, the refuge, and everything else, and that involves all of them. So it's kind of bringing all of Chad together as one. And to be able to take the ideas that and the issues that really matter to everybody and take them to the board. And I'm really happy to say that that kind of came from me and another young person. So yeah.
Great. I love how you flipped it on the head and said kind of like, well, do you want to have a seat at our table to the board?
Well,
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, we've got a couple of minutes, and I guess kind of looking forward, I'll just either of you can answer this. What changes would you like to see happen? Either it sounds like we've heard quite a bit within Chad, of what's moving forward. Are there other things that you want to see happen within your project, or just generally within supported accommodation that you'd like to see more of?
I guess from my point of view, just around our projects, I want it to be as wide open as it possibly can be for the young people. And I guess that's always been the biggest challenge in terms of involving as many young people as we can. And that's kind of something that we're working on at the moment. That's where the paid roles come from as well. It's actually getting young people to open those pathways up. And I guess from the sector as a whole, it's just I don't want people to be scared of it. As long as it's about understanding that there are going to be knockbacks, there are going to be things that are going to be difficult to do around it. You know, in a world where we see green projects knocked on their head, just for votes, it might be said. I think the fact that young people actually get a say in where they are and what they're doing is vital and really important. I think, yeah, I cannot speak highly enough from my involvement in this project. It's absolutely it's taken the inspiration of working with young people on a day-to-day basis and amplified it by 100%, just in terms of seeing what young people want and what they're capable of achieving.
That's great. Tori, do you have anything to add?
I think for it on like a wider level, I'd like to see as many different foyers and like housing groups like ours take this and like run with it. So like everyone has like their own little version of like the Your Voice project or the committee or whatever, and see it really like span across, the YMCA and everywhere that's like that. Because we're only like a tiny little part of it, whereas the YMCA are all up and down the country, and to be able to have this kind of spread would be absolutely incredible. Because I know people personally that like live in other foyers, and they're like, well, we don't have anything like this.
Yeah.
Yours sounds amazing. So I'd like it to become a wider thing. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. And just shows that when we relinquish a bit of power and believe in young people, like the effect it can have personally for you, Tori, but also how it's already changing the systems and the governance and the way that power works within the wider housing association is brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to hand back to Grant, I think, and see which way you want to take it, Grant.
Yeah, thank you just so much. I'm wondering, we've got some space just for some feedback. So I don't know if all three of you are comfortable, almost if there's a few questions just from folks or just kind of comments, if that's all right. I'm also conscious that a number of folks have joined us, which is wonderful. Great that you've come into our space just this afternoon. Just to let folks know, we're recording the session. So also just for your benefit right now, if you don't want your camera on or you're happy for your camera to be on, but also this will be uploaded and you'll be able to watch back or encourage other people to watch back on a later date, which is brilliant. So if I can just open out just to the space, and to others in the room. I don't know if people have got other reflections or comments. Please raise your hand. I'll draw you in, or if you want to put something in the chat, we'll try and make sure we get round to any of your questions right now for our panel. But I wonder if I can throw out a reflection from my perspective. And before joining the organisation I was in, we often talked about the difference between relational or transactional engagement just with people. And actually, as I was watching the clip that you showed, which does make you go feel a bit sleepy, it does make you could like meditate, Joel, and just reflecting on the time investment. So when I was looking at the 7 tests, you can't do those quickly. And I'm just wondering, either Tori, if you have a reflection on your experience of that, or what time involvement and commitment is. Because transactional we do quite quickly, don't we? This seems to be quite time intensive, and I'm not knocking that, but just reflecting on that. I don't know if Tori, if you've got a comment about your experience of that, or if others want to join in on that conversation.
Personally, I've spent probably the last 2 years working alongside Mark with all of this. And I think that the time that I've spent has been really beneficial to both myself and like the foyer itself. But at the same time, it's not very time demanding either. It's, every month we meet up for probably an hour, 2 hours, but within those hour and 2 hours, we get so much achieved. So as much as like it seems quite demanding on the time, it's actually really not.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Tori. Joel, were you wanting to come in on that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think relationships take time, right? But then I guess we've got to ask ourselves, what do we want? Do we want quick fixes that then fail a year down the line just because we've managed to get someone moved out quickly into a new project or whatever? And we can tick that box. We've got to move on. We've got a plan, move on. But actually, we've not built autonomy and skills for life with young people. Or do we want like long-term sustainable change? And I think that does take time, but I think it's probably not as hard as people think. The first bit is probably the hardest because it takes a bit of thinking and it takes a bit of reflection and a willingness to be challenged. Then after that, you start to create systems and change culture, which then creates a bit of a motivational snowball effect, which we can probably see just from the conversations with Tori and Mark. I've just noticed Alex has put a question in around what tips would you have for making it real? Any big do's and don'ts? I think, Mark, you'd probably be better answering that than me.
Yeah, I think one of the big things is understand that you're going to have your buttons pressed, that there are going to be things that you go, oh, I didn't really think we'd quite go that far. But be comfortable with that. Just understand that I guess kind of reflecting back on the last question as well, young people are the experts in their lives. They're the people who know what they want. They're the people who they're the people who can actually do something about it. So yeah, but in terms of empowerment, sort of people pressing my buttons and questioning why we do things in the way we do is absolutely what I would expect young people to be doing. I think another big thing as well is understanding where the gatekeepers are, and you can have gatekeepers who are quite resolute and don't want to move on things. You can have gatekeepers who are really well-meaning and really and will say all the right things. I even sort of count myself in that in some aspects of what the journey we've been on for the last 2 years. So I think it's that sort of understanding and being comfortable with being uncomfortable is really important.
That's really helpful. Thank you for that. We've got another question coming in from June. I feel like I'm on radio too. Are the Foyer Federation actively encouraging the 30 partner housing associations to put similar processes in place, regarding advanced thinking and empowering those living in foyers and housing associations? Great question. Thanks, June.
Yeah, Grant, you have got a Radio 2 voice. That's quite clear. So if you fancy another career, I think you've got one there. Yes, absolutely we are. And I think, so one of the things we do as part of this program is we have a learning cohort between the foyers that are receiving the funding. So they're learning from each other to start with. And that's kind of created like almost a group of champions for this approach and ways that we can challenge the other foyers. There are foyers that aren't within this learning program that are doing wonderful things. You don't necessarily need money to do it, but it can be a nice catalyst to just get people thinking and enabling them to innovate. So one example would be Your Housing Group have created a youth ambassador program. They're not within the funded program, and their young people across their 4 foyers do quality assurance visits for the other foyers. So like a young person from one foyer will go and visit and kind of assess the quality of that project and vice versa. So they've got this really nice way of young people speaking into the quality of the services. But what we try and do as part of our network gatherings is kind of spend some time allowing some of the projects to share with other foyers. And we're starting to create resources as well. We're currently looking at how do we expand this approach beyond the current group of foyers. There's still some that are engaged beyond the 7, and trying to work out what level of funding will help and what is kind of unnecessary. Because when you do these projects, you kind of have to test this out like live. You make an assumption, you put a bid in, you speak to everyone, and then you test it out. And I think that's one of the things we're trying to learn at the moment, like what's helpful and what's not, what bits are about learning and what bits are about collaboration, what bits are about influence. So we're kind of in that learning process at the moment, I would say, as the Foyer Fed and the group of foyers. But yeah, we're trying to keep an open mind to it.
Thank you for that. Another question from Trent. What are some of the biggest barriers you have all faced in trying to change?
Yeah, this was actually a question I was going to ask Mark and Tori and then ran out of time. So I'll throw that to you guys. I think you've covered a couple of them in terms of kind of integrating it into your kind of governance structures. But is there anything else you wanted to mention?
I think staff commitment's quite important. Just having not in so much that they wouldn't be committed, just making sure you've got room for it within what you're doing. It doesn't. I think, as Tori says, it doesn't take an amazing amount of time, but actually just being able to factor it in is really important, because you need to give it the time. You need to give it the attention that it deserves. I think one big thing for me was around maintaining young people's sort of motivation and the continual engagement in it. That was I think that was a concern right at the start. but as sort of borne out not to be a massive issue. We've got people like Tori and another couple of young people who've moved on from the foyer who don't have to be involved anymore. Not that anybody has to be involved, but don't, they haven't got me banging on their door asking them to come to a meeting, but they still want to be involved, and they still really passionately care about what goes on for young people within Dudley. And I think one of the biggest things for me is understanding that the numbers don't matter. So if I look back at the bid I put in, I was really kind of prescriptive in terms of how many young people I wanted involved in each project and stuff like that. It doesn't matter whether you've got one person, because if you've got one person that's an amazing young person like Tori who's really actively involved and really wants to be involved, she'll do the work of like 50 other young people. And then also just not being, I think that not being prescriptive around it, just understanding that my idea of what it was going to be was never going to be what it was going to be. So just understanding that the young people know, they know.
Yeah, and I think that's important also with the funding. Like Blagrave are very flexible with it. We're very flexible with our approach. So we've not treated it like this kind of fixed program where you've got to hit these targets and do that or the other. Obviously, we bring a bit of challenge to it and try and push people as much as we can. But there's got to be the opportunity to flex within that funding as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Tori, Mark. Really appreciate it. Joel, thank you for what you've kind of shared. It's been really quite inspirational. Could I ask, Joel, the video that you shared, are we able to share it? Is that in the public domain? Can we share a link?
Yes. I've got a slide at the end which has got a link to the website. It's on the main website page. So do you want me to do that now? In fact, Kate, would you mind sticking it in the chat, please? Just the main website.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry to jump in, but I just wanted to offer, we actually published an article recently with some of our key findings from the first year of the Youth Power Fund from across all 7 foyers, which addresses some of those barriers and some of those enablers. So I'll pop that in the chat for you as well. And also Tori wrote for us a fabulous first person piece about what her kind of experience was like. So I'll just whip that in there as well.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. That's just really, really helpful. Now, if folks are okay not to take a break and we could just keep going, if that's all right, just for folks, it'd be brilliant if we could get some time into some breakout rooms to look at a couple of questions just together. And Joel, did you have a slide that you could actually just, there we go, there's look at that. It's like we planned this. We're going to grab just some time to do some breakout rooms for 50 minutes or so. And 2 questions for us, I think, just to look at. Where do young people currently share or have power in your work? Let's celebrate just some of that's there. And then also, where do you have discomfort in sharing power with young people? Let's open some doors, look in some cupboards, and share some of our experiences there, and really quiz ourselves on that. And I think, as Mark challenged us, prepared to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, which might be helpful. So thanks just for sharing those questions. Tabby, are you going to help us just get into some breakout rooms? I think we've got some facilitators for each room that'll keep us right with our questions, and then we'll come back in about 15 minutes or so and we'll do some feedback there. Is that all right?
Great.
Let's give that a go. Thank you so much, folks. We'll see you in your breakout rooms. Looks like we're all coming back to the main room. Mark, I must apologise. I gave Mark a stinker of a question just as we started to come back to the room. So I don't know if you've been saved by the bell or you wanted to come back later.
It's fine. I finished it. You missed it, Graham. What can I say?
It was deeply profound, I'm sure.
It was amazing.
So thank you for that. Are we all about back now? So I was one of the worst facilitators of our breakout rooms as we started to, we had other kind of conversations, which were really, really helpful. Not least that we found we had colleagues on the call from Australia it's like late at night and they were keen just to join in. And as they were in the process of setting up their foyer and starting this very, process of working in this way to make sure that as teams were coming on board, that this was the starting point for them in this way of thinking. So grateful for that. But I wonder if we can take some time, maybe from either the facilitators of the breakout rooms, or if others want to comment on some of your feedback on our questions that we posed, or maybe you were like me and you didn't get quite to those questions. But great just to get some feedback from some of the rooms. Joel, were you in a room with others? I don't know if it was yourself.
It was me, Sarah, and Steph. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we had an interesting conversation, I think, around like ways that we're currently sharing power, where we see some of the barriers. So I was talking with Sarah at Platform about them creating a youth board and allowing the same levels of power as their trustee board, and how you go about doing that in a way that's psychologically safe for the people involved and not tokenistic, and that it's driven by them, which it sounds like wonderful stuff happening there. So we talked a bit about that. We talked about the importance of paying young people, and how it's the subtle and little things that can make a difference in how we approach those things, and the need for us to kind of go out of our way, because often we take our power for granted. So trying to go a bit above and beyond in terms of inviting people in and asking them creating the environment basically for them to engage with that power. So yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much what we did. Sarah or Steph, have I missed anything that we kind of talked about?
No, we didn't really answer the question.
No, we didn't.
We just talked about just how important it is, really, and just I still just find it really baffling, and when people find it difficult. I don't understand, if you've been working with young people for a long time, I don't understand how relationally you would find it difficult to let them have power. I just think it's because then you're doing it to them rather than with them, whatever you're doing. So yeah, we have a lot of fun with it actually, and I think that you get so much more, but you create such a more respectful environment and a kind environment, and I think that's where change is going to happen. So yes, it's great what you're doing.
So that's really, really helpful. I often think that in breakout rooms, we very rarely actually nail the questions, but we inspire each other to think about the issues around it. And so that's a really, really, encouraging and just and helpful reflection. Thank you for that, Sarah. Kate, were you helping out with a wee group?
Hi there. Oh, sorry, just unmuting myself. Yeah, we actually did not focus in on those two questions, but because we were we were having a really good discussion about advantage thinking a bit more generally, and June, I hope you don't mind me saying, shared a kind of experience from her own life of young people who may not have experienced an advantage thinking supported housing service, and really kind of highlighting the need for using that kind of advantage thinking language with young people, really understanding each individual young person and their experience of life in order to work with them and with their families, potentially in a positive way and in a way that's really beneficial. And also we spoke a little bit around power sharing, and how wherever you are in that journey, you can start, whether it's something that maybe you're the first person in your organization that's thinking about it, you can start, you can be that kind of spark, and begin that reflection work with others that you're working with. June, Naveed, have I missed anything else that you'd like to reflect back?
Hi. No, I don't think so. Other than the fact your last point, I think, is really important. So bearing in mind that although Joel said that some of your provisions go up to 30 years old, a member that was in our breakout room, works in a provision for older people, and so it's kind of something that we come across all the time in the organisation that I chair, which is about professional silos and about how, and that age cut-off, be it that a young person gets thrown off the cliff of CAMS at 18 and no mental health provision as an adult, or be it that, they transfer from children's social care to adult social care, they're a care leaver, and the social worker says, well, we'll provide you with post-adoption, with care leaver services until you're 25, and then you can bugger off. And then that young person at 25, what do they do when they're 30, 40 and 50? So yeah, I think it's there's a bigger discussion to be had with, I don't know who, about how you empower anybody who lives in a supported living environment.
Yeah, sorry, Kate.
I was just saying, absolutely.
I mean, June, I think all of us in the room wrestle with the siloed issues, that we bump into with funding and the criteria, which, then stops, and we create cliff edges, whether that be age or the particular, either illness that somebody has, or, some of the social challenges, people have, and they're just funded for this or for this long. And that's, I get why it happens, but it just doesn't make sense when people then, hit that cliff edge. What do we do for folks? I'm also encouraged by Kate, your comment about starting anytime. Don't hold back on this, that we all have, and we've got positions of power that we can give up. And somebody challenged me some time ago, if I let go of power, I have to give that up. It's not that all of a sudden I'm giving somebody a wee bit of a part of it. I no longer have it. And the challenge of what does that mean if I'm doing that, and I've got lots of positions of power, how am I letting that go so that other people can step into that space? Maybe those are some of my challenges where I feel a bit of discomfort. But thank you for that, Kate. Really appreciate it. And then in our group, I don't know, can I be really, I hope this is not cruel or unkind, Jennifer, you're still on the call, even though it's later at night, Australia. You don't have to say kind of much, but you really encouraged us as a group the moment we kind of realized the journey that you were on. I don't know if you want to even just briefly, just in a couple of minutes, about saying where you are, what you're doing, because I think that would really encourage everybody in the space rather than me trying to relay that.
Hi everyone. So we were just chatting about the upcoming foyer that we have here in Queensland in Australia. It's located in Townsville. So I work for Mission Australia, and this will be our first youth foyer that we're building. So we've just sort of popped in here tonight in the hope to just get a bit more of a heads up surrounding advantage thinking, and hopefully using this recording as a tool for our staff that we're in the process of hiring as well. So it's exciting times for us. This is all really new for us. So, but we've been doing a lot of research in that for quite a long time. Our build's halfway done. So we're, I think we're expected to open maybe January, maybe around then, I think, at this point in time. So the ball's getting definitely rolling now, and things are heating up, and it's getting really exciting.
Jennifer, it's just really encouraging, and particularly to the flip side of Kate's point, you can start anytime. You're embedding this from the beginning in your work and your thinking. And Mark, you got quite excited about that, when you were in our group, just to hear about that, even in the recruitment of, the team, and then, young people's involvement in all of that, kind of process and giving power in that space.
And the fact that Jennifer's I joined the foyer that's 40 years old. So the fact that Jennifer gets to do it right from the start is just amazing. I love that.
And Jennifer, you're in good hands with because we've got our sister charity, the Foyer Foundation, over in Australia, and Liz, the chief exec there, and they're doing some great work. And aiming to have 50 foyers, I think, by 2030. I think I've got that right. So it's really exciting that you've joined us. So it must be an unusual hour for you.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's 10, just after 10 p.m. here. So yeah, it was, I don't even know how we found this. It just showed up on our Eventbrite page and we were like, oh, Advantage Thinking, I'll sign up and I'll do it. So
Right.
yeah, so yeah, no, so we've been yeah, we've had amazing support here from Foyer Foundation, from other foyers that are all around Australia as well. We've been collaborating with. Yeah, it's been awesome. It's been a really cool experience to be a part of so far. And yeah, I'm really glad that we're able to implement all of that from the get-go. Like, I think that's really special as well to be able to do that. Yeah, I wouldn't imagine doing it any other way. Like, I think it would have been hard doing it a long time ago, like when it wasn't the same. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity. Well, good luck,
Yeah,
and
sure.
we'll look forward to. Do send us some. I'm just sorry, Grant, to take the time. Just do send us some pictures of your building as well when it's done. Send about.
Yeah, for sure.
At the end, I'll just put my email up as well. So if anyone wants to get in touch.
Too easy. Thank you.
How cool is that? I just get really encouraged just by stuff like that we find it and just kind of happens. Folks, because we were quite deliberate about not catching a break because we thought we could just kind of push through. So it means we're ahead of time and we can do a few things just with that. We can pause right now and just, open for questions just for folks, and we can have a bit of a dialogue. Or we could just kind of realize that we're finding a place to land and we've done what we wanted to do in our space. But don't want to rush people off if there's burning questions or things that people want just to look at.
I just took that up there, Grant, just so we've got that there if people do leave.
That's really, really helpful, Joel. So you've got some of the details there, the website for Advantage Thinking, and also the Foyer, and also Joel's contact details, which is great if you can reach out. Are there questions or comments just from the room? This is where I give you an awkward pause.
I just wanted to say thank you, because everything I've heard today has really opened my eyes to it. May Day has had a limit. Well, we've done a few successful projects working with young people, but what I've learned today has really opened my eyes, and just those are considerations that I can take going forward. So thank you, everyone who's contributed.
Thanks for that, Steph. Yeah, me too. June, rather than me reading your text, because I just saw it come through, you want to just share with us briefly? You there, June?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself.
That's all right.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, sort of from Joel's perspective, but also importantly from Tori's perspective, what you think about what's going on in England with Ofsted and supported living providers for 16-year-olds being registered.
Sure. Well, I mean, we could be here for quite a while. Yeah, I don't know how much Tori will be aware. Tori, are you aware of the regulations that are coming in through Ofsted?
And maybe even for me, because the broader room, I don't know if you could just give a quick summary.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So Ofsted have brought in regulations for young people who have lived in care and are moving into semi-independent accommodation, of which Foyer's class under that, but so do numerous other projects. So it affects 16 and 17-year-old people who've been in care, and basically there's been a bit of a, I mean, we've not been big fans of the way that it's basically done what, I can't remember who it was that said, but basically created another silo, because there's another group of 16 and 17-year-olds that don't necessarily come into the care system that are not included within these regulations. So it automatically has created two different groups within that age range. Is actually sent a few kind of judders through the network. And I mean, Mark's organization, Chad, is a good example of this. they've decided to no longer take 16 and 17-year-olds because of the burden that the regulations are putting, and they only have a small amount of young people that fit into that category, and it will require additional costs, additional training, additional investment. And so one of our big concerns, and the thing that we've kind of put out to the Department for Education and Ofsted, is that we're concerned that some of the quality providers of support for that age range are going to opt out of being in the market anymore, which will have the opposite effect of what they want, which is to improve quality. The main reason they've created these regulations is to stop rogue providers. So, private providers that are providing poor quality accommodation and support for that age range. The problem is that mixed accommodation projects like Foyer's that work with 16 and 17-year-olds who's been in care and lots of other young people look at this one aspect and see it as quite a big burden when they're already struggling to make ends meet and to deliver their services in budget. And so there's definitely a wider campaign piece to do, and we've been involved in that. We've worked with the National Housing Federation and number of other partners and tried to come together and put that out there. We're not against the regulations per se, because the regulations are there to try and increase quality, but it's the effect, it's the kind of unknown effect of what bringing them in is going to have on the wider supported housing sector. So that is as quick an answer as I can do for it.
We could do a seminar on that one all.
We probably could, yeah.
June, is that helpful?
Yeah, it's exactly as I thought probably
Yeah.
Joel would say. Yeah.
I mean, June,
will...
I'm happy to talk more outside of the meeting if you want to know kind of more about what we're doing and how and kind of our response and stuff. Some of our responses on our website as well. So because I know it's a tricky situation for a lot of people.
I'll email you, Joel.
Yeah, go for it.
I think for me personally, as a young person being involved with it, I wasn't a care leaver myself, but I know a lot of people that were. For having something rated by Ofsted, because it's primarily known as, being something that's rated by schools, and a lot of people that rates like schools and stuff, it's quite I don't quite know how to describe it. It's not the most pleasant feeling to have them involved, because I personally felt as once I got to the foyer, that was like my break away from, the school experience. And I went to like multiple different schools that were graded all throughout the Ofsted system, from, poor and up to, what were classed as, like outstanding schools, which actually didn't reflect how the school itself was, because you have those days that are set for the Ofsted to come in, and that's actually not a reflection on the day-to-day of those schools. The one that I went to that was good was far from. It was probably one of the worst schools I'd ever been to, but because of everybody putting on like the best show for those days, it was like that's the school to go to. But I actually suffered quite a lot through being there. So to have a place that is quite sacred to me, it was the place that I learned to be myself, to actually love and be comfortable within myself. To have that now come down to being graded the same way as a school is quite daunting. So like I really struggled with my GCSEs, and I've finally found the confidence to go back to that. Whereas I think had this Ofsted thing come in literally like last year, the chances of me being able to get out of that mindset of how I felt in school, and the same with a lot of other people, would have been a lot more difficult. I feel like it's going to be quite restricting to young people, especially as Joel said, with it being that break in between, the two halves of 16 and 17-year-olds. I turned 21 at the end of the year, so I can't personally speak on that, but I can see it being quite a divide from the young people's point of view as well.
Tori, thank you just so much for that. I think we should probably let you have the last word, just on that piece. Maybe we should encourage maybe Ofsted to think about some advances thinking, and how they do that. So, folks, can I thank you all so much for being here in this space with us today? but particularly to the Foyer Federation kind of team who've been just joining us today, and to Mark and Tori, we just really value what you've brought into the space, how you've challenged and inspired us. And if you want to share this with any of your colleagues, please use the New Systems Alliance website and go into that, and you'll find, when we get a moment, I don't think it'll happen immediately, the recorded episode will be available for folks to be able to look at that. So please share that just with others, and please, get along to the New Systems Alliance website for some of the other content that's there, or for some future events, which will be equally as inspiring and challenging and comfortable and discomfort all at the same time, if that makes any sense. Folks, a huge thank you. We finished a little bit sharper, but I think that's a good thing. I think we came and we did what we wanted to do in this space. Really appreciate your time. Have a good rest of your day. Take care now.